Yes, it is the US Navy and its cruiser doctrine. Or rather, its very interesting development of cruiser doctrine in the 1920s and 30s, because this is a Navy which is strange. It is a Navy which is strange, and I say this with love in my heart for the US Navy. But when it comes to their cruisers and their cruiser strategy in the 1920s and 30s, it is, frankly, strange. This is a Navy which goes from the Omaha class, which are... well, you'll see a picture soon, and I'll be discussing them at certain points in the videos. And long patrols coming up. Sort of... they look like someone's sort of trying to decide a pre-Dreadnought era cruiser, armored cruiser, for the modern post-Dreadnought world. And you're just going, who hurt you? Who hurt you? They go from the Omahas to the Brooklyn class and the Baltimores. And the Brooklyn and Baltimores are about as cute as cruisers can get. Honestly, I have a lot of affection. Any class which treats its bow as a disposable asset is going to give me a lot of love, and I'm going to give it a lot of love in return, and that's the Baltimore class. And the Brooklyns, well, let's be honest. Another name for the Brooklyns could be the American Town class. And we all know I have great affection for the Town class. And they're even named for towns in the same sense that the Town class are named for the towns. Because when you look at the Town class, you go, hang on, that's actually a city, that's actually a city, that's actually a city. Liverpool, definitely a city. And again, when you go through the Brooklyn class, you've got Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Savannah, Nashville. They're all cities. Honolulu, possibly could claim, well, we're an island. But, you know, they're also cities. But it's the period between that which is really interesting. It's the US Navy going from, and I kid you not, if we just quickly flick ahead, from a battle force which has no cruisers, and a scouting force which has no cruisers, to a battle force which will have a heavy light cruiser, as we would define an element, including every one of the Brooklyn class. Go, hello, we're here. And a scouting force, which is basically, well, their only service ships are heavy cruisers. Just, that's a transition to make in 20 years. That really is a transition to make. So, what am I doing today? Well, this comes out on the 13th of June, so this is sent to you from the 7th of May. So, hopefully, touch wood, fingers crossed, I would look at some magpies if there were some outside for me to look at. All's gone well, and we are on our way back and are landing and having fun in Gatwick. And this will come out in the evening when, after I've flown home, had some food, taught for a few hours, probably walked the dogs. I will be in bed by the time this goes out. So this is going out at 7 o'clock in the evening. Thank you very much for your support. Again, any money raised, what's it going towards now after this is after the Canada trip's over? Well, it's probably going to pay back the probably far larger than estimated before trip credit card bill for books which have been purchased on trip. And it's probably going to, for what else? Probably going to start to go into the pot for Australia. Because whilst I'm hoping to get funding for that next year, the odds are going to be your support, which is going to make that possible for me to go see the last Daring Class Destroyer, HMS Vampire, and for me and Drac and Jamie to get together and do the first ever bilge pumps where all three of us are not only on the same continent, not only in the same city, but in the same room, in person. If there's enough support and enough funding, we might even do it in a pub, live, with other people watching us. First ever bilge pumps with audience participation. Although if I say that too loudly, that will get organised for me. We can always hope. Anyway, so the scouting force and the battle force. This is the lovely idea to reorganize the US Navy, which they've been fermenting and discussing over for a period. For starters, despite it being theoretically breaking the US Navy down into 4 elements, there's actually 10 elements. The first 4 are the battle fleet, the scouting fleet, the control force, and the fleet base force. Now, honestly, you would be mistaken for believing that cruisers should belong to at least 3 of those, if not all 4. But no, cruisers will not belong to any of them. And there's also the 6 more categories of forces not assigned to the United States Fleet, which includes the Asiatic Fleet, the Naval Forces Europe, Special Service Squadrons, the Submarine Divisions, Atlantic, Submarine Divisions Pacific, and the Naval District Forces. These plans are put together by a former sergeant of the US Marine Corps, who's at that point the Naval Secretary, Edwin Denby, who will be, despite not being personally implicated, will be basically forced out because of the Teapot Dome scandal, where naval oil reserves are transferred from the Department of Navy to the Department of Interior for their management, because persuaded it's more sensible to be managed by the Department of Interior by the President and the Secretary of State for the Department of Interior, Albert Fall, who then leases them to a friend who ran oil companies. Sometimes. And then there's Warren G. Harding, who's the president. The only guy who thought that the Washington Naval Treaty was, in all forms, a brilliant idea. We will leave that be. Okay, so this is the battle fleet on role and doctrine of the US Navy. The battle fleet is the big, heavy gun. They are the big, powerful hitting force. Please note, they do have Langley, the closest thing the US Navy has at this point to a proper aircraft carrier. When I say Langley is not a proper aircraft carrier, she is, for this period, an equivalent aircraft carrier and a viable ship for 1923. That won't last very long, and the fact that Saratoga and Lexington are already sort of wandering around the construction dome, yes, that is lasting very long. But these are the scenarios you have post-treaty. This is your battle fleet. New York, Texas, Oklahoma, California, Arizona, Nevada, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania are there. And New Mexico is the flagship. California is not only a member, a cruiser, not only a battleship, but is also the fleet flagship. She has 2 roles. She sits in Division 3, and she's the fleet flagship, which is standard US Navy doctrine. It's quite a good idea. And they have all sorts of destroyers. All sorts of destroyers. But, and I say this with love in my heart for it, no cruisers. Nada. Not a single one. Zilch. Zippo. Nada. No cruisers. None. Here is the scouting force. I'm still in shock every time I read this that they are headed up by Utah, Florida, North Dakota, Wyoming, Arkansas, Delaware. Quite often, the flagship for the force is Wyoming. Your scouting force, therefore, is theoretically headed and literally cornerstone foundationed by the slowest battleships you have in your fleet. I know that's a rather long silence, but I wanted to give you time to contemplate that. The scouting force is the slowest battleships in the fleet. Now, when Fury and they were conceiving the scouting force, they were of course building battle cruisers for it. Shortly after they decided they weren't going to build the battle cruisers anymore because of treating going to convert them to aircraft carriers, it was going to be anchored on aircraft carriers. Shortly after that, they realized they're not getting the aircraft carriers, and eventually it stays on battleships until they have enough cruisers in the role. That, therefore, is not a scouting fleet. That is your secondary battle fleet. Please note that. And it's got destroyers. The destroyers are possibly part of the support of it and the reconnaissance front. One of the things I find interesting is the support fleet. And the other ships there, they have that. They are a vertical structure. What's also interesting is that by 1939, only 2 of these ships in this list, only 2, will still be in scouting force structure. I haven't bothered bolding all the ones these will be in the scouting structure. Battlefield. So this is USS Florida, and the reason I've got USS Florida is I want you to see this design. This is what the US Navy's. This looks like, for her period, a thoroughly modern, thoroughly capable ship. We know her limitations, but there is no mistaking this ship for anything other than a Dreadnought-era battleship. And she looks good at it. She really does. I have nothing but respect for the Florida class. Mainly because thanks about it this way. They are ships which are unrepentantly battleships. That's a good thing. They are unrepentant with what they're built for. They're not going to last. They're going to bring a lot of metal with them when they come. And that's the point. Yes, they're armed with 10, 12-inch guns. But that's still a capability. That's still something which they have. And it's going to allow them to fight pretty much anyone at this period. Yes, I wouldn't want to take one up against the Queen Elizabeth class, but there again, there aren't many battleships in the 1920s I would want to take willingly up against the Queen Elizabeth class. There are arguably these ships I wouldn't want to take up against, I don't know, Hood and Renown either. But we'll leave that to one side. That's because they're mounting 15-inch guns and they are significantly faster, so they can pick when they come in and fire and disappear off. But pretty much, if it's not Royal Navy's elite creme de la creme, I'd take these up quite happily. So where are the cruisers that exist? Because surely the US Navy's not completely without cruisers. They're not. They're yet to be commissioned. They're ordered or out of commission. They're basically cruisers. They're just nowhere to be found in actual service. They're nowhere to be found. And this is the Omaha class. Now, please note, the Omaha class are ordered, designed and developed during the late 19 teens, so they're 1915, 1916, 1917 designs, that are ordered in 1918 to start construction and are in construction until roughly 1925. So they ordered and, in large part, built prior to the treaty system. They are based, theoretically, therefore, in knowledge gained during the First World War. And here is the thing. As ships and as a service record, they are good ships. But as a design, that's how you get 10 guns on a ship in the US Navy. 10-gun broadside. 5 twin turrets. They have twin turrets. They do super firing. They don't do super firing. They have casemate guns, but that's for their secondaries. This is casemates for their primaries. It looks like a sort of weird mashup or a transition ship between a pre-Dreadnought era cruiser and a Dreadnought era cruiser. It looks confused. It doesn't deserve to be. Just imagine the ship. Still those Westinghouse geared turbines, still the 32.5 knot speed, still probably the 4 funnels. But imagine it with a pair of twin turrets forward, another pair of twin turret sitting between the stacks perhaps, and a pair aft. This has an 8-gun broadside, that would have a 10-gun broadside. This can fire 4 guns forward. That design could fire 4 forward. 4 aft, 4 aft. One looks like a cruiser that is reflective of a horse designed by committee, which is a camel. And the thing is, a camel is actually a very useful, very intelligent, very capable animal. But if I'm trying to turn up and impress someone, I'm not likely to ride in on a camel for 2 reasons. One, it can randomly take offense at people and start spitting them in the eye. Never happened to me, but has happened to a few of my friends. Quite humorously. And secondly, as much presence as they have, the horse tends to have more cachet. What does this design say about the US Navy in terms of its cruiser doctrine? It says we want a lot of guns, but also says we don't really understand the technology we have. This is supposed to be a modern ship. I'm looking at equivalent of, in terms of firepower capabilities. Yes, it's up there with an E-class on paper. It's probably better in some respects. Let's be honest, the E-class has one of them has a single twin turret. So this is 2 twin turrets. That's great. But the thing is, this could have looked, by just applying similar ideas as they'd already been baking into their battleships for several generations by this point, a lot better than it does end up looking. Not something you hold against the ship. That's something you hold against the US Navy and their Department of the Navy and the US government, Congress. This is, please note, critiques of the ships, and this is something I'm making in this video, which is going to be the second of the US Navy series out, but because the Pensacola are going to come out first, although I haven't recorded the Pensacola yet, but I've written it. The point is, the critiques are not really of the ships. The critiques are of the people behind the ships. Because they're confused and they don't know really what they're getting out of it. This is a ship which just screams confusion. Look at this ship. Think of it as this is for almost a decade the epitome of the US Navy's cruiser force. Their most modern, capable cruisers. And you know what the US Navy is capable of. So that's where this becomes a disappointment. Because again, they're built with, there are no treaty limits when they're first designed. Even if you want to keep lengths because of you suggesting it's infrastructure needs that are limiting your length and beam, you could still do that with the twin turret arrangement I've outlined. It would not be difficult. And it would give you a more capable, but also more aesthetically presentative ship. Here's the big kicker. Okay? There is actually a benefit of these ships. Because they look like this, it means the Royal Navy doesn't bother with building more light cruisers. They can afford to concentrate on the County Class. Although the County Class are, of course, light cruisers. As the Hawkins class were large light cruisers. Which are the design limits that these things are based on? The Omaha class they're not an aesthetic threat to the Royal Navy, the President's mission. They're just not. And that's sad, really, for them and for the US Navy. Because it means, very quickly, the President's mission for the US Navy starts to become quite problematic. And I would say, 1920s and 30s, that's something that their force really suffers from. Until they have, not even really the Pensacola's, but more likely the sort of the Northamptons, and I would honestly argue Portland's in service. They don't really have good present ships. They're cruiser. What is the fleet by 1939? Well, look here. Wow, that's a lot of Brooklyns. Where did they come from? They're going to do the screening work, aren't they, for the fleet? And you can also see there's the Omaha class. Cruiser Division 3. However, screening force. Cruiser Divisions 8 and 9. The entire Brooklyn class. Brooklyn class, also Honolulu, providing the flagship for the for the cruisers of the battle force. Always nice to know where they're going to be. There's also some light cruisers sitting, again, Omaha class. They're being used as destroyer leaders, which was another reason for this ship's design. Again, it was also another reason probably for them having quite so many 6-inch guns and being stuffed with 6-inch guns. But it's a case of the idea was got a stuck at gun, so let's go casemates and make it look like that. So, the brand new cruisers. The Brooklyn class. They're there. All that remains of the battle force from 1923, pretty much battleships. They're the ones bolded. All that remains. but they've got some cool light cruisers for their screening duties and to protect the fleet in its movement. And where have all the heavy cruisers ended up? Well, this fleet is interesting. Only 2 ships surviving from 1923, Sandpiper and Teal. And they are tender ships supporting the patrol wings. Yes, Scout Force does not have aircraft carriers. However, the Scout Force does have Indianapolis, Chicago, Northampton, Houston, Pensacola, Salt Lake City, Chester, not the pre-World War one, Louisville, Portland, Minneapolis, Astoria, New Orleans, and Memphis. Which is nice to have. Let's be honest. Memphis is a cool ship. But that force is all heavy crew. It's the scouting force. It's not got aircraft carriers, but it's got all the independent elements. And in many ways, the point is this. In 1922, for that, they're talking about a battle force, scouting force, a control force, and a base force. I would argue that by 1939, this is more of a control force than a scouting force. You've got no aircraft carriers, but you've got a lot of aviation, which is seaplanes, which can be supported by tenders, so they can mobile from places like from the islands, etc., and the inlets, set up base and support them, and they can do their fixed patrols. And you've got cruisers, which can also do patrols. So I would argue that this is actually more your trade protection / the area control force. Not a scouting force in structure. And in reality, because your light cruisers, your aircraft carriers are with the battle fleet. So what are you going to offer that it's not got already? Oh, and it's also got scout planes as well. The important thing was, though, the US Navy couldn't change the names of the forces. What they were using them as is one thing. What they were naming them was another. Names had to be retained. Names couldn't change, because if the name changed, then you'd have to explain yourself to US Congress. Didn't want to do that. Did not want to do that. So, who do we owe this to? Well, 2 officers who, frankly, get forgotten. We have Ashley Herman Robertson, and we have, and I kid you not, Josiah Slutz McKean. Slutt. That's his name. These 2 officers down here. These officers are critical to the US Navy's cruiser design. They are the Vice Admirals in command of the scouting fleet from December the 22nd, 1924 to May 30th, 1907. They are going to not... They're the officers who... They don't build the scouting force to become. They set the framework and the tone and the idea for what the US Navy cruisers are going to be conceived in. So yes, some of the cruisers actually start design and construction during their tenure. But more importantly, they're the ones who take the Omahas, take the existing US Navy forces they have in that critical, and I mean absolutely, obsessively critical 2-3 year period, and turn it from something which it might have been into something which it is. They turn it from an idea that's higgledy-piggledy to actually give it form. And that's the form which the US Navy will build on. Yes, they won't always get it right, because they are building a cruiser force, and this is something I cannot overstate, from scratch. The doctrine of what the cruisers are going to be for, whether it's going to be scouting, i.e. reconnaissance, whether it's going to be screening, protecting against other forces, whether it's going to be a second battle line, is having to be developed on the hoof while they're doing it. And they're doing this without a foundation to build from. The Royal Navy has a very easy foundation to develop its cruiser doctrine for World War II. There's a reason I haven't had to do much of a video about Royal Navy cruiser doctrine. If you would like, I will do a video about your Royal Navy cruiser doctrine, where it comes from. But the Royal Navy cruiser doctrine has been going since the age of sail. They started out as being things called frigates. It's gone full circle. Today, frigates are basically used for cruiser role still. Point is, the Royal Navy's been using them for presence and task group. Presence, task group. Presence, task group. Presence, task group. Presence, task group. Yes, they'll do reconnaissance. Yes, they'll do screening as part of the task group. Yes, there'll be extra firepower as part of the task group. All those things. But presence, task group. Presence, task group. Presence, task group. And that's what they're building from. What is the US Navy going to use? Well, presence role? We don't have an empire. That's very imperial. But you need presence. They do sort of start to develop presence. Think about presence. Time goes on. Screening? Well, yeah, that's pretty good. But are we going to use destroyers for that? We always have large numbers of destroyers. Does our cruiser force need to do the screening? Reconnaissance? Well, as they're developing a reconnaissance role, freaking aircraft carriers are coming into existence. The frigating aircraft carriers are rising up. Aircraft are pretty good for reconnaissance. Will they be aircraft carried by the cruisers, or will they be aircraft carried on an aircraft carrier? This is the problem. So, US Navy cruiser doctrine is constantly in development and almost flux. Here it goes on. And this is why you get these interesting ships. This is why you get the classes you do, which have those treble turrets and twin turrets and that sort of configuration up there. If you think about it, if they've been building a county, they'd have gone for 4 twin turrets. They wanted more guns than the British. And considering they built something which was 9,250 tons, which means, and I quote, for every 370,000 tons, instead of building 37 10,000-ton carriers, cruisers, you can build 40 9,250-ton cruisers. Yeah, as if that's a lot of help. They got that. Imagine what would happen if they used the 10,400 tons the Royal Navy used for the counties that are equivalents at the time. Imagine what those ships could have looked like. They could have had 4 triple turrets. Still kept the speed. But no. Why? Why is the US Navy doing this? Why are they experimenting like this? What is going through their mind? What are they thinking? And honestly, what they're thinking is they're trying to develop what the cruiser's going to be. One of the interesting things is, very early on, they start to come up with these really good hull design. I mean, you take off the superstructure, you take off everything above the hull. That ship looks good. Any of these ships look good. From the hull down. It's the stuff on top which they're playing around with. They're playing around because they are still developing their doctrine, their role, what their cruisers are going to be for. Because you can't make these decisions. If your ship is just going to be part of the screening force, it might as well have 9 8-inch guns. It doesn't really matter having a lot of 8-inch guns versus another 8-inch gun cruiser, because the odds are, if there's a fight, it's going to be multiple cruisers versus multiple cruisers. There are going to be destroyers and battleships involved, and it's going to come down to a lot more than just who has the most guns. However, if you're going to actually be doing a distance screen, a reconnaissance screen, and like the British doctrine of an A to K line, ooh, then your number of guns matters, because if you bump into the other screen, you might be beyond an easy support. In which case, having those extra guns are going to matter. The point is, though, the US Navy has a style, they have a form, which is in existence with their battleships, their destroyers. You expect something to have 4 stacks if it's going to be a fast ship in the US Navy. You expect it to have 4 stacks. But honestly, you expect it to look less pre-Dreadnoughty. And they start out from that form, and they get better. You can see during this design, they get better as time goes on. They do. They produce the beautiful Brooklyns and Baltimores, which, as I said at the beginning, I really love. But because of the flux of their doctrine, because it doesn't have a foundation, because they are literally writing it from conception, and because of some of the people involved that McKean and Robertson have to argue and deal with, even become admirals of scouting, there are a lot of missed-starts. This is going to be an interesting series for me, because I have a feeling I'm going to get a lot of hate. People who will presume I'm critiquing the US Navy because the cruisers, because they're US Navy. And I will say this. If in doubt, if I am critiquing one of these ships, and I am being anything less, the odds are the people I'm critiquing are not the ship. Definitely not the crew, and probably not their commanders. More than likely, if I'm critiquing anyone, it's the US state of the US Navy Department, and the fact that they couldn't understand quite what they needed their cruisers to do, what they wanted their cruisers to do. And honestly, what they needed to do was take a big step back and go, right then, we are now going to be a world power. But the trouble is, for them to take that step back, they need to have the security of funding, which politically they didn't have. So every time they're going for the best they think they can get to fill the role they think is the role they want to have at this time. And that's what happens with their cruisers. And honestly, there are some of their cruisers which remind me of the cut price counties, but they're better, they're more sensible, because they're triple turrets. I don't know. I can honestly say the Omaha class tend to be my example of ships which are good, by to the fact that the Navy designing them knows and are wantingly designing a ship less capable and less not as good as they could have designed it at the time. Even for a similar cost. Honestly, the cost difference for building something which has 5 twin turrets versus what they built would have been minimal, if anything at all, in the final wash. You've already developed you've already gone to the cost of developing the twin turret. You've got that in service, you've got that available. What are you doing? So what have we got coming up? Well, you've had the Pensacola class, you've had the whole series of the final parts of the Washington Naval Treaty and the London Naval Treaty. Hope you've enjoyed them. We have got coming up tomorrow the Witchita class of the Regia Marina, which I'm looking forward. And then on the 15th of June, there is going to be the Equitable London Treaties Overall Equitable Treaty. Now, I have scheduled that also so that you have a little over 2 weeks of constant videos, all scattered up, so I can pretty much, if I'm feeling tired when I come back, can take 2 days of peace, and then I can work out what the live is going to be about. I'm honestly tempted to say that if there's enough comments to this video that you would like it, and I might not schedule a live till sort of later, but if there's enough comments to this video that people would like it, I'll do a live on the treaties on the Thursday. So that would be on the 16th, if you'd like it. So please, comment below. If you've watched the end and other people haven't, and you don't know if they're commenting, please mention it in Discord, mention in the comments, put it around. People would like a live to discuss the Equitable Treaty, the London Equitable Treaties, please tell me, and I will do it on the Thursday the 16th. Take care. Have a nice day. Hope you enjoyed this, and yeah. Hang on, no, it's Patreon 55. Let's put it this way. If enough people would like it, I will move Patreon 55, would like that discussion. I'll move Patreon 55 to the 19th of June. Or possibly to making the 23rd and 26th. Because, or 30th of June. Mainly I say this because those will be on topics which I'll have to provide, put together new presentations. I might well just bump those up. Take care, thank you very much, and yeah, go to fleetorganization.com. That's where I got all the stats about the 1923 and 1939 fleets. Worthwhile looking at, it's a really cool thing, and the link's down below. At least it should be. Take care, have a nice day, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.